I was worried back then about would it negatively impact me, because it did feel at the time that if you spoke out, then you would be somewhat demonized. So it was hard. But I did feel like I had absolutely no options and I was completely penned in a corner.
G'day everyone and welcome to the Thomas More Centre channel. My name is Mark Nakievetsky and today it's my pleasure to be speaking to Laura Rogers. Laura is a mum living in Lismore, New South Wales, and she's here to talk with me today about her experience of having stage 4 kidney disease during the era of COVID. Laura, welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me.
So the last 6 years you've lived through a rare diagnosis, a rushed pregnancy, a traumatic birth, trying to access care during COVID, and raising a baby while your husband lost his job. For people who don't know your story, where does it begin?
Well, you're right. It has been a rather tumultuous 6 years. And Hogan and I have actually been married for 6 years. So the story really started about a few months after we were married. I found out that I have a very rare genetic kidney disease. And that was a shock. You know, we were just married, both working full time. You know, there was nothing to worry about. Life was great. And, you know, I got the call that I did, in fact, have this rare disease, and it changed everything. It changed the whole conversation for our future. And essentially, I, at the time, had 50% kidney function already. It had lessened to that. And they said, look, you know, you're married. If you want to have a child, you should go for it now, because we don't know how long it will take until your kidneys perish. And so then Hogan and I, you know, we had this very stressful position where we were entering into a high-risk pregnancy, and that was 2020. So I actually fell pregnant in the beginning of the pandemic. I was going to the hospital every week to have the baby checked and to have my kidneys checked. But the real drama began when I gave birth. So I started pregnancy at 50% kidney function, and when I gave birth, I dropped to 25% kidney function. I was living in Brisbane. The birth was bad. It was a very bad one. And they kept me in hospital for about 2 weeks post the baby by myself for 9 nights after a cesarean. I didn't have Hogan to help me. It was just an awful time. And obviously the whole COVID protocols all the time as well. It was just high stress. You know, everyone's on edge. It wasn't a great time to have a baby, as many people know. They went through worse than I did. And so post having the baby, I was very unwell. I then spent that next first year of our child's life just trying to raise him with only 25% kidney function. At the same time, my husband was working with you, Mark, and he was getting intense pressure to get the vaccine in order to keep his job, while I was at home struggling with my health. And at the time, I wasn't being pressured because I was breastfeeding. And so it was kind of, I was in a strange kind of gray area where no one was really pushing me to do anything because I was breastfeeding. And so I essentially spent that year very aware of COVID. For some reason, it's hard to explain how, but for some reason I felt cautious and hesitant about the vaccine. And I remember that beginning from the very beginning. I don't know, and I still can't explain to this day why I felt. It was like my instincts were saying, you just have to pause for a moment. And at the time, you have to understand that I was a high-risk person, so I didn't know how my body would cope with COVID. And so I was taking the risk factor very seriously. So through my pregnancy and through Samson's first year of life, I was very careful to avoid catching the virus. And I was also very careful about the vaccine itself. So I just want to preface this by saying that everything that I experienced and all of the drama that I went through, I don't want people to think that I just launched into a really strong belief and that I wasn't weighing up my options. I really, really was. So while Hogan was working for that first year, he was working very hard, long hours. He was getting intense pressure to get vaccinated. And I want to explain that this was challenging for us because my husband was very healthy, very fit, and therefore very, very low risk of needing the vaccine and of having any negative ramifications from the virus. So what I wish at the time that people kind of had a little bit more empathy and understanding for our situation was that while pressuring him to take something that we were hearing at the time had negative effects for men in his age bracket, so the heart risk, while they pressured him to take it, I was at home, facing a very dramatic decline in health. Losing my kidneys it's not fun to experience, and it is highly serious, We didn't want to create a situation where Hogan potentially had a side effect and then I had no kidneys and then we had a baby. So he wasn't even one. And so I just, at the time it was really difficult in society. And, you would remember how people felt and the way they acted. It was a highly emotional topic, but I do wish that people could sort of see beyond the topic and see that, we had really interesting circumstances and why we would choose to hesitate. There was a lot of reasons for it. So, I guess then Hogan did actually get fired because we made the decision as a family that we didn't want to risk his health while I was unhealthy. And that meant that we were faced with no income and we were living in Brisbane and not able to afford rent. And it's just really simple. You have a baby at home. How could we afford to live in the city? It just wasn't possible. So we essentially needed to move back to my parents' house because we had no other options. And we are very lucky that we had that support network. So we essentially packed up very quickly and we moved across the border. And there were also at the time the conversations about, is the border going to close or not? And so we felt like we needed to get across the border. But also because I was, of course, seeing specialists at the hospital because I was so unwell, the conversation started to turn toward, okay, well, your time is coming where you're going to need dialysis and a transplant and you need to be vaccinated. And the Queensland mandates at the time were very clear that I would have to be fully vaccinated being, I believe it was 2 at the time, in order to go through that whole process of being on a transplant list. So while Hogan got fired, we understood that Queensland meant there was a mandate, the borders were closing, and so we decided, okay, we just have to leave. And my parents were very supportive and said, come here and we'll look after you because there's you're going to do. You can't survive in the city without a job. And so we moved across the border, moved here. And then I had this great vision in my head that, okay, well, Hogan's lost his job, but there's always a positive lining, right? So he can look after Samson and I will rest because I haven't rested this whole year. You're raising a baby. You're not sleeping. I was so fatigued. It was unbelievable. And I thought, great, he'll look after the baby. I'll rest. And maybe I can hold my kidneys at whatever it was at the time. I think it was 20% by then. I was like, that's great. I could live at 20% for years. That'd be great. And we moved here and instantly he kind of, imagine like he takes the baby, I finally rest and then my kidneys just completely go. It's just a massive drop down to 12 to 15%. And that's the danger zone with it. Like you need dialysis. You need it because it could just drop without you even realizing it could drop and you'd be done. And that was obviously very traumatizing. And I essentially was counseled toward getting, peritoneal dialysis, which is dialysis through a tube in your stomach. And so I went in for surgery and that's when dialysis began.
Okay, so can you tell us more about your dialysis and trying to raise a baby while having chronic illness and having no income in your household?
So the first surgery they advised that I do was to start peritoneal dialysis. And it was spun to me or marketed to me in the most interesting way, but I must have voiced my worries about having to leave my baby. And they said, look, no, peritoneal, you're going to be such a great mum on it. You're going to be able to run around, look after your kid. It'll be like you're all better. You're going to feel amazing. You plug onto the machine at night and it does 10 hours overnight. And then during the day, you can be, an awesome mum. So it sounded so hopeful. And I thought, okay, I guess I'll do this surgery. And essentially they put a tube in your stomach that sticks out. And then that tube connects to a machine that I had to hook up every night. I had to set it up properly, fully hygienic in my room. And the tube goes into your peritoneal layer. And essentially the machine fills your stomach area, peritoneal cavity, with a sugar solution. And then through osmosis, it pulls toxins out of your body. So the key thing is that when you lose your kidneys is that it filters your blood. And so if you're not filtering your blood, then you have a buildup of toxins and they can kill you. For example, too much potassium will stop your heart. So it's really serious, scary stuff. Your kidneys do so many things. I think they have 6 major functions. So when they're gone, there's a lot of things in your body that don't work like they should. Brain fog, for example, your hormones don't work properly, all sorts of things. So I went into that surgery. I woke up from it. I instantly knew that something was wrong. I was in too much pain. It wasn't right. And another female who had the same surgery as me, she was experiencing the same symptoms. And I think that we both may have had the tube placed incorrectly, a little bit too low. So essentially something that was supposed to be just, oh, yep, another person getting a surgery, no biggie. Unfortunately, I had complications. And for the next few months, I wasn't able to walk properly. I had pain from the tube on the inside of me. It's a little bit too much information, but just pain. So constant pain. I couldn't pick Samson up. I had a tube sticking out of here. Like I couldn't hold him. I couldn't have him with me. And that has such complexity to it. It's, I don't like to think on it much. It was a very tough thing. And so I essentially sat in an armchair for 3 months while they tried to figure out how do they deal with this fact that I have all this pain, constant pain. It was awful. And they had a workaround eventually where they would keep 1 liter of this sugar fluid in my tummy 24/7 so that the tube was just floating on my insides instead of scraping on my insides. It's very awful. And I would plug onto this machine every night, and it wasn't a walk in the park at all. It was the worst. I did it for 1 year, and it was the worst, most torturous thing because every time it would drain the fluid out, it would hurt. It would feel like my insides were like going, it was so bad. And so every 1.5 to 2 hours I woke up. So I was waking up more than with a newborn. So I wasn't sleeping. I was in pain. And then all these other strange things happened. I was allergic to things. I was allergic to tape. I was allergic to all sorts of strange things. And I've never been someone allergic to anything. So it was just a really horrific year for problem after problem. And ultimately, that 1 year was completely pointless because I wasn't even able to dialyze correctly. They think I was too skinny, too small, and they couldn't put enough fluid in to actually take enough toxins off. So I was getting worse, which is scary. I wasn't improving, and I was in constant pain. And eventually, as they kept trying to put more fluid in me, trying to get it to work better, they caused an umbilical hernia. And then the fluid was going through that umbilical hernia into my stomach, which caused peritonitis, which is an infection throughout your insides, which is super, super dangerous. And so I was rushed into hospital, and they took the tube out, and then they put an emergency permacath into my heart. And so that was another form of dialysis that I had to start doing. And I did that dialysis for 1 year. And it had all its complications as well. And so because it was having its complications, they then did another surgery and gave me the third form of dialysis, which is called a fistula, where they cut into your wrist and they join a vein to an artery. And so that vein plumps up and becomes huge. And then they use it to put cannulas in every second day in hospital to do dialysis through a machine. They take all your blood out, filter it, that kind of thing. So I did have all 3 forms of dialysis, which is super uncommon. Typically, you just have one and you stick with it until you get a transplant. So when I say I was complex, I was incredibly complex at almost every single turn. In fact, I would say every single thing that I went through, something unexpected happened, some strange side effect, and something that they couldn't explain. So ideally, you go on dialysis, it works well, you go on a transplant list, and you get a kidney. Now, that can take years on a public waiting list. It can be years. And at the time, through COVID, the wait was increasing because they weren't doing as many surgeries. So that was scary. So while I'm having drama and complications, it's very scary. I'm not actually safe. I need a kidney. And they made that very clear. You really need one, and you need one quickly. Except, fun fact, they weren't letting me on the list in order to get a kidney. So to start to explain why that is, I came to New South Wales. I didn't know for sure if there was a New South Wales mandate about transplants. I think at the time we felt that there wasn't. And so we were very excited to come to New South Wales because I thought, okay, if I need to be on the list, it's going to be possible. But I sat down with my local doctors and they said straight away, no, you can't be on the list. You're unvaccinated. There's no way you can be on the list. And I do remember being very shocked. And I said, how can that be? please, I really need to be on the list. Now, the other thing that makes it complicated is that when we moved here, I got COVID. Hogan and I both got COVID. It was pretty much instantly once we moved here. And remember, I was trying to avoid getting COVID. So I did get it and I was a little bit stressed. But guess what? With only 15% kidney function, I got over it in 2 to 3 days. And I was pressured on the 4th day, even though I was almost better, I was pressured by the local team here to go get monoclonal antibody therapy. And I said yes. I felt pressured, but I had done a little bit of reading into it and it seemed like it would be fine. And so I went and did it. And yeah,
For those who are
it was
listening,
fine.
what's monoclonal antibody therapy?
So my understanding is that it was a type of infusion where they put the antibodies into your system so that you can fight COVID. That's my very rudimentary understanding.
Okay.
And I thought that that was a better option than the vaccine because I already had the virus. So what would be the point of going to get the vaccine after having the virus? So I did get that therapy. It seemed fine. I came home. I felt fine. And COVID, I was better already from COVID anyway. And what's funny is Hogan took a little bit longer to get better than I did, which is kind of funny when I think back because I was so sick. So when I went in and said, hey, so I've started dialysis, I need to go on the list. And they said, you can't be on the list, you're unvaccinated. I said, well, firstly, you gave me monoclonal antibody therapy. And the government advice at the time was that if you've had the therapy, you cannot get vaccinated for a certain amount of time. So I think it was months. I want to say 3 to 6 months, something like that. So there was a chunk of time where I wasn't allowed to be vaccinated because I've had the therapy, but also I had natural immunity. And so there was no point in me getting the vaccine anyway. So as someone who was completely snookered, I couldn't even get the vaccine if I wanted to. I had no options and still I was being told, no, you can't go on the list. And that was not just my specialist. That was the local hospital, the local transplant team, all of them. For me, local, that was my local health advice. And so that started a 6-month journey where while I'm doing all these surgeries and having all these complications and I'm scared for my actual life, I'm being told, no, you cannot have a kidney. You don't deserve a kidney. You aren't vaccinated. You cannot have one. It was really, really hard. And the manipulation was extreme. The coercion, the kind of language where they question your intelligence and they even said things like, I think they assumed that my parents had a sway in why I wasn't getting vaccinated, which wasn't the case. I mean, I was 20, 28, 29 by then. And, one doctor said, you don't have to tell your parents, just get vaccinated. And I'm like, what have my parents got to do with this? I'm a grown woman.
Exactly.
I don't need to hide anything from my parents. And my parents had nothing to do with it. As I said, I'm a grown woman. I have a child and a husband, and I've used my brain and my reasoning and my instincts and my personal health to say I am not going to take it, and I have various reasons for it, and I can clearly and explicitly say, 1, I can't get it at this stage. 2, I have natural immunity. 3, why would I risk it? You don't even know what my disease is. It was only explained in Australia about 7 years ago in a doctor's forum. Hey, everyone, there's this rare kidney disease. And I think there's about 100 families in America that they know who have it. It's very rare. So I was sitting there thinking, okay, so I can't. It was honestly, I sat there and I said to them, so you're just going to let me die because you're telling me dialysis isn't working. And now you're telling me I don't deserve to be on this list. I can't be on this list. So I'm thinking, okay, so I have nothing. I have no future. I'm just going to sit here and wait for what? What am I waiting for? This is crazy. You have to, it's very rough. It was very rough. And so I don't even know really how I stood firm because they were really awful conversations, when people think that you actually have no IQ. And also really awful because at the same time, society and the community, a lot of them probably didn't have much empathy for anyone who didn't want to get it either. So it was doctors being cruel. It was people that we knew just, I suppose not even really trying to understand why I would hesitate and why I would be scared. I would be scared of some new technology. Of course I would be.
Yeah.
It was really hard.
Were you posting about this at all on social media at the time? Or was this a private battle?
Yeah, I think I did do a couple of posts, you know, shared things, that kind of stuff. I did feel the pressure at the time to be careful about what I was liking and posting. I generally felt a surveillance around the topic. But I was sharing some stuff, and I actually did do a couple of interviews where I was just very open and honest. I said, this is what's happening to me. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. And it feels deeply, deeply unfair. And that was really nerve wracking and even this is nerve wracking. You know, I do worry I was worried back then about would it negatively impact me, because it did feel at the time that if you spoke out, then you would be somewhat demonized. So it was hard. But I did feel like I had absolutely no options, and I was completely penned in a corner. And so I kept standing firm. Every conversation, every doctor's appointment, just standing firm, saying, no, I'm not going to do it. Why would I do it? And I shouldn't do it because I've got natural immunity. Eventually 6 months passed, or 5 months, and I said, I just burst out a little bit to one particular person. I just said, look, this is so ethically wrong. It's morally wrong. You would let me die. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm done. I'm not doing it. Enough. I'm not doing it. So where are we going to go from here? And he said, fine. You know what? Just go down to Sydney and you can talk to them about it. Off you go. Go down to that transplant team. That's where you have to have a transplant, Sydney. So go down and talk to them about it. So Hogan and I drove to Sydney. We took Samson and we met with the transplant team. We got an appointment. And this is the thing that really confuses me, and I don't know quite what to do with it. But I sat down in a meeting with one of the doctors and I said, is there a mandate and can I go on the list? And she said, there is no mandate. Yes, you can be on the list. And I was obviously gobsmacked, because I've spent 6 months not on a list when I could have been given a transplant, and I've been suffering the dialysis that doesn't work. And apparently there is no mandate. And I don't know why the health advice was mixed. I don't know. And I don't know. I don't understand. I just don't.
Well, it seemed a bit of
Yeah.
a hodgepodge because they were changing the rules day by day, and
Yeah.
I'm not surprised in a sense that one part of the state has different frameworks and policies and guidelines and protocols than the other part of the state. That's just how it was, it seems. So,
Pretty terrifying though, because
yeah,
was one state. So I was shocked and thought, how can there not be clear messaging about such an important thing?
yeah,
It's like a rumors, gossip game in the medical field. It was very, very odd. And when I did come back from Sydney and I went back to the team in my regional area, again, they said to me, so, you know, you can't be on the list. And I said, actually, I am on the list now. They put me on the list. And then I'll always remember, one of them said to me, you could have been a used car salesman, couldn't you? And I said, no, actually, I've got my rightful place on the list. So, whoa, hold up. I didn't manipulate anybody to get on the list. I haven't done any coercion. I'm not some kind of used car salesman that convinced someone down there to put me on a list. I asked a question and they said there's no mandate, and now I'm on the list. So I could feel the discontent. You know, they didn't get me to be vaccinated and now I'm on the list, and that was awkward. And to be honest, never brought up again.
was it possible that a string was pulled for you, not because of any manipulation, but because you found some sympathetic ears down in Sydney, or was it very
I've never
much that there
considered
was
that.
no mandate? There was no prevention of you getting on the list.
I think that the way it was told to me, it was almost as though, no, there is no mandate. It was almost like, no, let's just clarify, as though it was this interesting topic that's somehow controversial. It was the way it was spoken. I felt like, oh, this is a controversial topic, but yes, there is no mandate. I don't think there was a string pulled. I think just there was no mandate, but it wasn't well known perhaps, that would be concerning if that were the case as well, really. The whole thing is concerning. But I think the thing to realize for me, though, is once I was on that list, I will admit that I felt terrified to be taken off the list. And I did feel like if I didn't toe a line that any other little misdemeanor would get me off the list. And I was really, really scared. And finally being on the list meant, oh, I can survive. And I was in pure survival mode by then. I was on the list and I was so thankful that I was on a list, and I just shut my mouth and I never spoke about, in fact, I have never spoken about COVID or vaccines with my regional team ever again since then. It's never been spoken. It's just this awkward thing that, this awkward thing that happened and we're never going to bring it up again. It's really strange. It's really strange. And yeah, so I don't know what to make of it.
It strikes me as time goes on, because I had an interaction on Facebook and someone said, move on, we're past it. And I'm like, well, it's convenient for some people to have moved on, but I don't feel like there's been a reckoning of any sort. Whether the healthcare system, the government, the media, I don't think that they're willing to acknowledge what went on and their parts in it. But anyway, I suppose we can dwell on the negative. But I mean, you said it privately that you experienced moments of connection and clarity and joy during that period. Could you tell us some more about those moments?
Yes. So it's funny because I'd often see people through my dialysis journey and people would always say, how are you? Like, what's going on? And I'd say, you know what? It's like this juxtaposition between, yes, intense suffering, but also a lot of joy and a lot of gratitude. And people would say, how are you getting through it? How are you doing this? I don't understand how you're doing it. And I don't really understand how I got through either. But I would say that, yes, I was suffering, but it just brought out what was important day to day. So, for example, the fact that I had a child, the fact that I was able to have a child, huge. Like, that felt like a miracle to me. So even though I could barely get through my days, I was getting through my days with my child, and that felt like a win. And I was still able to sort of exist in a beautiful part of the world, see my parents, have my husband by my side and my child, and it was okay. That I was okay in all those other ways. So blessed, so lucky. And also I think the whole time I felt as though God was holding me through it all. And some people would say, are you angry at God about it? Why aren't you angry at God? Why are you somewhat okay with it all? But I don't know. I never felt that. I never experienced that. I just felt like I, for some reason, was going through this massive uphill battle. I do think that I was learning lessons. I have learned to be strong, resilient. I've learned to advocate for myself. And I've learned to be grateful for what I do have. So honestly, there was so many parts of joy, going out into the backyard and eating oranges with my child. I felt absolutely awful, but I'm just laughing, picking oranges off a tree and being so free. So, and, leaving the city, leaving that high pressure environment, leaving that stress, coming into the country, feeling like I could breathe again while I simultaneously was so unwell. It was just this constant juxtaposition. And so I think, honestly, that's how I got through. You just have to focus on the things that are so precious and you're so blessed to have. So I think that's kind of all I can say to that, really.
Yeah. Okay, so you had this traumatic time. You were told you could be on the list. So tell us then about, I guess, when word came through that you were going in for an operation, or how did that process work? Perhaps, if it's more complicated.
Yeah, so it did get more complicated because I was on the public waiting list, and that can take an unknown amount of years. And I was, as I mentioned, getting worse, and I was using the dialysis through my heart, which meant I had to go into hospital every second day and sit in a chair 5 hours a day. I couldn't get up. I should stay there, chained to the chair. So my specialist in the end said, hey, look, dialysis, still not going great. You need to have a serious discussion with Hogan about potentially donating a kidney. And I didn't want to do that because I love Hogan and I didn't want to risk his health, which I haven't wanted to risk it the entire time. And I was so scared of taking a kidney from him and what that would mean for him and for Samson. It was a really hard decision to make.
I suppose, can I just jump in and ask, so I've always been under the assumption that you can operate fine with one kidney. So are you saying that there's quite a number of risk factors in those who donate kidneys?
So they say that I think it's a really good, it's really, the risk isn't great. So I think they say maybe it's 3 years less on your life, I think, if you donate a kidney. So no, I wouldn't say it was crazy risky, and they didn't make it sound as though it was really risky. We did meet with the doctor who performs the removal of the kidney, and he said, "Oh, I really don't want to operate on a healthy, young, almost 30-year-old man." And he said, "But I understand you're trying to save your wife's life, so I'll do it, but I don't really want to do it." So I think it's more the having to do it, and it's major surgery. And so any major surgery has risks. And Hogan had never had major surgeries, and I was just nervous. I was so nervous. It's much easier to cope with yourself being sick than watching a family member be sick. So poor Hogan had to watch me be sick, but I had just the thought of him having to do it, of what it would mean for Samson, the knock-on effects for Hogan trying to heal what I'm trying to heal. And in the end, we didn't have a choice, though. We had to do it because I wasn't coping. There was no kidney coming. I could have been on the waiting list for years and years and years, and it just seemed like it wasn't going to work out. They could have lost me, which is, it sounds so dramatic, but that's
I imagine any husband would be willing to forgo a kidney if it meant saving his wife and mother of his child. So
yes, he was very keen. He was keen to do it. Yeah, he was keen. I just wasn't.
I understand there are some kind of issues around transplants and stuff, that there's confidentiality and whatnot.
Yes.
But I guess if you can speak to it in an appropriate way, it wasn't Hogan's kidney you received, is that correct? It was someone else's. Yeah.
Correct. So
how does that work? Is it a triangular thing, or?
Yes. So essentially it's called the Paired Exchange Program, and it's Australia and New Zealand wide, where it's a different waiting list, where people who have a partner or a sibling or a parent, they go on a waiting list to match with another couple. And so it's like a swap. In our case, we match with, quite a few people, and they do sort of like a ring where they put one kidney in, one kidney out, and so on and so forth on the same day. And it needs to be confidential because, I have no idea whose kidney I got, and we don't know where Hogan's kidney went. And so honestly, I view it as I received Hogan's kidney, which it's not his physical kidney, but I received his donation because it was for me. And I don't know where my kidney went. No, not my kidney, where his kidney went. But whoever's kidney I received was a great match for me, that is the biggest blessing of all. It's matched well with me. And I feel very fortunate for that. And Hogan's kidney, he was very fit and healthy man. So whoever received his kidney, I hope they're doing well, because it was a great kidney. I really hope it's matched well to them too. I feel I don't want anyone to go through losing a kidney. It would be horrific. So we went on that list, but that list also has a waiting time frame, and I actually can't remember how long we would have waited. Perhaps it was months, but it wasn't a whole year, which is excellent. So when it came through, I just couldn't really believe it. My specialist said, "Hey, look, this might be happening," but because so many more people are involved, it's such a high chance that it'll get cancelled or get pushed back. Someone might change their mind and not want to donate, which can definitely happen. So I was just sort of not believing that it would actually happen. Even till the day we went down to Sydney, I still thought there's no way this is going to happen. And somehow it did happen. So we went to Sydney. We had to leave Samson at my parents' house, which was really hard. We both had to leave him for almost 2 weeks, and that was awful for him and us. And Sydney was, it's Sydney. It was crazy and expensive. And we were so fortunate to have an amazing Catholic community around us who helped raise money for us to go down. And we are so eternally grateful for that, because we would not have been able to afford it. It was, just the hospital accommodation was so expensive. And so we went down, and it actually happened. And, it was intense. It wasn't a fun surgery at all. I woke up with tubes coming out of all sorts, my neck and everywhere. It was the most major surgery I've had, and I've had 8 surgeries now. And Hogan, he came out just happy as anything, on a lot of drugs, just, he felt all right until I guess the drugs wore off and he realized how much pain he was in. So he actually has, I think it's 5 keyholes cut into him and a big cut that looks like a C-section cut. So he had a lot of wounds. And I have a 15 centimeter long cut down the front of me, and where they tuck the kidney in. So it happened. And I did experience rejection on the second day. So all of a sudden, my body went, whoa, you don't belong here. What are you, foreign kidney? And tried to get rid of it. But they gave me a lot of immune suppression, a lot. I think it was a 5-day treatment of some crazy stuff. So the key thing is, moving on from the transplant, is that I take a lot of medication that suppresses my immune system so that I don't reject the kidney. And that's okay. That's the cost. There's a cost to all, going through the medical system, and the cost is the drugs, and they're quite intense. There's a lot of side effects that are unfortunate. Cancer being a common one. So I just try to be very, very healthy and mindful of what I do and eat. But yeah, not much of an immune system. So that's been interesting with a now 4-year-old dealing with that. But dealing with a low immune system is nothing compared to dealing with, dialysis. That was the real kicker. So yeah.
Are those anti-rejection drugs a lifelong thing, or can you be weaned off them? Okay, they are.
No, it's lifelong. It's lifelong until I need another kidney. So this is the thing. On average, a kidney transplant, they say, lasts about 12 years. My father had a kidney transplant and his lasted 37 years, which is considered a miracle. That's unheard of. So I'm really praying that I get a couple of decades, because if I can, then I don't have to deal with this again until much later. Samson will be grown. I can deal with it again later. And I know it's in my future again, which is, that's not nice to think about. But I think the great thing about having this rare disease is that when I received someone else's kidney, they told me that because that kidney doesn't have the disease that I have, I therefore don't have the disease attacking that kidney, if that makes sense. So I don't have another disease causing kidney failure. For example, diabetes. I don't have that. So I'm hoping that this kidney is happy and stays put for a long time. Please, God. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're the beneficiary in a lot of ways of the modern medical system, transplant, obviously. But you've seen both sides. You've seen the horrible side of it, where I suppose you felt treated less than human. I suppose, what have you learned about the healthcare system, and what do you think it could do to improve, given it's such a mammoth size and so bureaucratized?
I think I have learned that the only person in your medical team that will truly know your health is yourself. So I have learned that doctors are very busy. They are human, and humans make mistakes. And I think that that's okay. They're human, but you need to have autonomy and an understanding and a comprehension of what they are suggesting and what you've experienced. I can't tell you the amount of times where I've said my history to a doctor or a nurse, and I have heard them relay it on to the next person, and it's incorrect. And I have to go, hey, that's not right. Just pause for a second. So I think in this crazy busy health system, if you don't advocate for yourself and know yourself, then you will fall through the cracks, or mistakes could happen more. So I've had to be strong and careful and keep my wits about me at all times, which is also really hard, and it feels unfair because you think, I'm exhausted. I don't want to have to make sure that I have everything correct. So I did feel at times that I fell through the cracks. I think it's a bit of a shame. But I did learn, advocate always, and just to have the courage to do that.
So, Laura, now that some time has passed, what would you want others to take away from your experience?
I think I would want people to understand that suffering is obviously very, very challenging. But at the same time, I think it's only through suffering that we realize the good things that we have and things to be grateful for. and that everyone has different degrees of suffering, but if they can kind of try to see the positive in every moment, and I don't mean the toxic kind of positivity, but just being grateful for what you do have. I think I said all sorts of things to myself to try and get through. I even said things like, at least I don't have cancer. That's okay. Okay. I'm going to deal with this. At least it's not something else. I don't know if that's the right way to deal with it at all. But I just tried to view my suffering as, okay, I'm going to learn something from it. And that wasn't really fun either, because it's not enjoyable to go through any form of suffering at all. But I would want people to try to think, okay, can I learn something? I would lean on God more. I think I found that my faith was strengthened through this time. I didn't feel as though I was falling away from God. None of it made sense to me, but I felt closer to him, like as though he could see how confusing and difficult it was and he was there, not that I was forsaken. And so I think, staying close to your faith. And honestly, the amount of times I felt like God paved a way for us. Somehow things worked out. We survived with no income. Somehow things seemed to just work out in the end. And even looking back, I somehow got a kidney, after 2 years. That's amazing. I can't even believe that. After all the things that I went through and all the difficult conversations I had and having to stand my ground and, be ridiculed, I somehow am here now and healthy. So I don't really know. I don't know if I have any really great words of wisdom, but I'm only young-ish, and all I did was just try to focus on what I do have, which is my husband and my child, and just see the goodness in the world. That's it, really.
Yeah. Finally, Laura, how important was it to have a good husband through this process?
Well, oh my gosh, I can't even begin to explain how much he did for me. Honestly, those 2 years of dialysis, I don't really know what I was doing. I think that I was on the couch a lot. I wasn't grocery shopping. I wasn't cooking. I don't know what I was doing. I actually can't really recall. I was deep in the pain of all of it. And so he picked up the slack in every single way that there is. Caring for Samson, caring for me. And I just always used to think, oh my gosh, we are really living through our vows in sickness and in health. It's 100%, we're only in our first 5 years of marriage, and this is the biggest amount of learning that we probably will ever do in our marriage. Perhaps, maybe not, maybe there's more coming. But I was so grateful for him because he just kept going and stayed positive. I think that's what's amazing about Hogan. He's just positive at every single step. When I might toward negativity, he's still positive and happy and would smile and just soldier through, because it was not easy for him at all. So I'm grateful that God gave me Hogan. He's exactly what I needed through all of it.
Very good. Laura Rogers joining us from Lismore in New South Wales. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.